The letter arrived on what would have been my father's 78th birthday. Dear Michael, my name is Robert Chen. I served with your father in Vietnam. There's something I need to tell you about the day he died. Something I should have told you decades ago. If you're willing to hear the truth, please contact me. I don't have much time left. My father died in Vietnam in 1971. My entire life had been built around the story my mother told me, that he died a hero, saving his squad during an ambush, that he'd been awarded a Silver Star posthumously, that he'd sacrificed himself so his brothers could live. It was a good story, a noble story, the kind of story that made sense of a senseless war. And now, 53 years later, a man claiming to have served with my father was telling me there was a different truth I needed to hear. I called the number on the letter. An elderly voice answered on the second ring. Mr. Chen, this is Michael Porter. You wrote to me about my father. There was a long pause, then a shaky breath. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would. Wasn't sure I deserved for you to. What do you mean? What is it you need to tell me? Not over the phone. This needs to be in person. Can you come to Portland? I'll pay for your flight. I know that's a lot to ask, but this can't be done at a distance. Something in his voice, desperation mixed with shame, made me agree. 3 days later, I was sitting in the living room of a modest house in Portland, facing a man who looked like he'd been carrying the world on his shoulders for 50 years. Robert Chen was 74 years old, frail from age and illness, with the kind of weariness that comes not from physical exhaustion but from a lifetime of guilt. I have stage 4 lung cancer, he said without preamble. 6 months, maybe less. And I can't die without telling you the truth about your father, about how he really died, about what I did. My chest tightened. What you did. He pulled out a worn leather journal, dog tags and photographs, spread them on the coffee table between us like evidence at a trial. Your father and I served together in the 101st Airborne, Vietnam 1970-1971. He was a good man, one of the best I ever served with, and I got him killed. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? My father died in an ambush. He saved his squad. He was a hero. That's the story the Army told your mother. The story they put in the official record. But it's not what happened. His hands were shaking as he opened the journal. This is my diary from Vietnam. I've carried it for 53 years, never shown it to anyone. It has the truth about what happened on March 17th. March 17th. The day my father died. The date I'd grown up marking every year with a solemn remembrance of his sacrifice. Tell me, I said, though part of me didn't want to know. Tell me what really happened. Robert took a deep breath, his eyes going distant with memory. March 17th, 1971. Our squad was on patrol near Quang Tri Province. Your father was squad leader, Sergeant Thomas Porter. I was his second in command. We had 8 other men with us. Standard search and clear operation in an area known for enemy activity. He pulled out a photograph showing young soldiers and I recognized my father immediately. That same strong jaw and confident smile I'd seen in all my mother's photos. Around 1400 hours we received intelligence about a possible enemy cache hidden in a village about 2 clicks from our position. Command wanted us to investigate. Your father thought it was a bad idea. The intel was vague. The village was in a vulnerable position, and we'd be operating beyond our support range. But I pushed him. I was ambitious, wanted to impress command, wanted to prove I was ready for leadership. I told your father we should take the mission, that it would be quick in and out, that it was a chance to find significant enemy supplies. Robert's voice cracked. He agreed because I pushed him, because I was his friend and his second and he trusted my judgment. So we moved out toward the village. When we got there, everything seemed wrong. No civilians visible. No sounds of normal village life. Your father wanted to abort, said it felt like a trap. But I insisted we at least do a quick sweep. Said we'd come all this way, might as well check it out. He was crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face. So we entered the village, split into 2 fire teams. Your father took one side, I took the other. And that's when it happened. The village was a trap. Ambush positions on all sides. The moment we were deep enough in, they opened fire. Immediate casualties. 2 men down in the first seconds. Complete chaos. We were caught in a kill zone with no good cover and no easy way out. Your father started organizing the retreat, covering fire, tactical withdrawal, trying to get everyone to safety, and then I panicked. Completely froze, saw the muzzle flashes, heard the screaming, watched men dying, and I just stopped functioning. Couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't lead. Just stood there while the firefight raged around me. Robert looked at me with haunted eyes. Your father saw I was frozen, saw that men were dying because I wasn't doing my job, so he made a decision. He left his covered position and ran across open ground under fire to get to me, to shake me out of my paralysis and get me moving. He reached me, grabbed me, started dragging me toward cover, and that's when he was hit. Multiple rounds from an AK-47, center mass, He went down right there, holding on to me, using his body to shield me from the fire. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He died saving you because you froze? He died because I pushed for a mission he thought was dangerous. He died because I insisted we investigate despite his better judgment. He died because I panicked in combat, and he felt responsible for getting me to safety. And he died because I was a coward who couldn't function under fire. Robert pulled out the dog tags, my father's dog tags. He pressed these into my hand as he was dying, said, "Get them home safe, Chen. Get our boys home." Those were his last words. Not about himself, about the squad, about the men who were still alive. What happened after he was hit? His sacrifice broke my paralysis. Seeing him go down, seeing what he'd given up to try to save me, it snapped me back to functioning. I took command, organized the withdrawal, called in air support, got the remaining 7 men out of that kill zone. The official report said your father died heroically while defending his position during an ambush, said he provided covering fire that allowed his squad to escape. All of that was technically true, but it left out that the ambush happened because I pushed for a bad mission. It left out that he exposed himself to enemy fire because I'd frozen. It left out that I was the reason he died. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let the lie stand? Because I was a coward. Because after we got back to base, the company commander called me in, said your father had died a hero, said the squad had performed well under my temporary command after he fell, said I'd be recommended for my own squad leader position. And I didn't correct him. Didn't tell him I'd frozen. Didn't tell him I'd pushed for the mission despite your father's objections. Didn't tell him that your father died because of my failures. I just accepted the narrative. Let them write me up as someone who'd stepped up after the squad leader fell, rather than someone whose mistakes had gotten the squad leader killed. Robert's whole body was shaking. The army awarded your father a Silver Star, gave your mother a flag and a medal and a story about her husband dying heroically. And nobody ever told her that he died because his second-in-command was an incompetent coward who pushed him into a trap and then froze when it mattered. I sat there absorbing this, trying to reconcile the story I'd grown up with, my father the hero, with this new version where he died because of someone else's mistakes. Did anyone else know the truth? The squad knew I'd frozen, they saw it happen. But in the after-action reports they backed the official story. Whether they did it to protect me or because they genuinely believed your father had died heroically, I don't know. Most of them are dead now. Cancer, accidents, suicide. Vietnam killed a lot of us slowly, even after we came home. He pulled out more documents from a worn folder. These are my copies of the after-action reports. The official narrative. They're accurate about the tactical situation, but completely silent about my role in creating it. About me pushing for the mission. About me freezing. About your father dying to save me. And this, he handed me the journal, is my contemporaneous account, written the night we got back from that mission. Before anyone told me what the official story would be. It has the whole truth. Everything I'm telling you now, documented while it was fresh. I opened the journal to the entry dated March 17, 1971. The handwriting was shaky, emotional, clearly written by someone traumatized. It confirmed everything Robert had just told me, the mission he'd pushed for, his paralysis under fire, my father's sacrifice to save him. Why are you telling me this now? After 53 years, because I'm dying, and because your father's dying words were, "Get them home safe." He meant the squad. But over the years I came to believe he also meant his family. Get them the truth. Get them home from the lies I'd forced them to live with. I've spent 53 years being a coward, hiding from what I did, building a life on the foundation of your father's sacrifice while never acknowledging that his sacrifice was necessitated by my failures. And I can't die a coward. I need to finally tell the truth, even though the truth destroys any good opinion you might have had of me. What do you want from me? Forgiveness? Robert shook his head. No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I want you to know the truth about your father, that he died because of someone else's mistakes, but that his dying act was still heroic, that his last words were about protecting others, that even though he died because I failed him, he died trying to live up to his responsibilities. And I want you to decide what to do with this truth, whether to tell your mother, she's still alive, right? Whether to demand the official record be corrected, whether to expose my failures publicly, or whether to let the official story stand and just carry the truth privately. I looked at the journal, the dog tags, the photographs, evidence of a story completely different from the one I'd grown up with. My mother is 83 years old. She's spent 53 years believing my father died a hero. What would telling her the truth accomplish? The truth, even if it's painful, even if it changes how she remembers him. But does it change how she should remember him? He was still heroic. He still sacrificed himself to save someone else. The fact that it was your fault he had to make that sacrifice doesn't make his sacrifice less meaningful. Robert considered that. Maybe, but your mother deserved to know the whole truth. Deserved to know her husband died because of someone else's incompetence. deserved the chance to direct her grief and anger at me rather than just at the war itself. Over the next hours, Robert told me everything he remembered about my father. Not just about the day he died, but about the man he'd been. The soldier who'd always put his squad first. The leader who'd made hard decisions to keep people safe. The friend who'd trusted Robert even when he shouldn't have. Your father was better than me in every way that mattered. Better soldier, better leader, better man. And I got him killed through my ambition and then compounded it by hiding from responsibility for 53 years. I don't know if telling you this makes anything better. I don't know if confession eases my conscience or just transfers my burden to you, but I know I couldn't die with this secret. Couldn't meet your father in whatever comes after this life while still hiding from what I did. The rain continued outside as we sat in that living room. Two men connected by a death that had happened before I could form lasting memories of the man I'd lost. Tell me more about him, I said. Not about how he died, about who he was. So Robert did. For hours he shared stories I'd never heard. My father's sense of humor, his care for his men, his letters home to my mother, his plans for what he'd do after Vietnam, go to college on the GI Bill, become a teacher, coach Little League. He talked about you constantly, Robert said. Carried photos of you and your mother, would show them to anyone who'd look. He was going to teach you to play baseball, was going to take you camping, had all these plans for being a dad. And then he died, saving my worthless life, and all those plans died with him. And you grew up without a father, because I made bad decisions, and then froze under pressure. As evening approached, I had to make a decision about what to do with this information. Robert had given me copies of everything. His journal, the dog tags, the photographs, his written confession of what had really happened. I need to think about this, I told him. Need to decide whether knowing the truth is something my mother needs at 83. Whether correcting the official record accomplishes anything except embarrassing the army. Whether your confession helps anyone or just salves your conscience. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be dead soon anyway. Whether you expose the truth or bury it, I won't be around to face the consequences. That's part of the problem, isn't it? You waited until you were dying to confess. Waited until there couldn't be real consequences. If you'd told me this 30 years ago when there was still time for accountability, that would have taken courage. Waiting until you're on your deathbed, that's still cowardice. Robert flinched but nodded. You're right. Everything you just said is completely right. This confession is as much about easing my guilt as it is about giving you truth. I'm still a coward, just a coward who finally found enough courage to admit what he is. I left Portland with my father's dog tags, Robert's journal, and a completely different understanding of March 17, 1971. The flight home was spent staring out the window, trying to reconcile the hero my mother had raised me to honor with the victim of someone else's failures that Robert had described. Over the following weeks, I wrestled with what to do. I read Robert's journal multiple times, researched the official records, tried to imagine what my father would have wanted, and I thought about my mother, about whether an 83-year-old widow deserved to have her memories of her husband's death rewritten, about whether the truth would give her closure or just replace one pain with another. I decided to tell her. She deserved the truth, regardless of how difficult it was. We sat in her living room, the same living room where she'd received the news of my father's death 53 years earlier. I explained who Robert Chen was, what he'd told me, what he'd confessed. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. I always wondered, she finally said. The official story never quite made sense. Your father was too careful, too experienced to get caught in an obvious ambush. I thought maybe there was more to it, but I never pushed because the story they told me was bearable. It made his death meaningful. Now I know the truth. He died because someone else made mistakes. And that's harder. Because it means his death could have been prevented. Means if this Robert Chen had been better, or less ambitious, or braver, your father might have come home. Are you angry? I asked. I'm furious. At Chen for his failures. At the army for covering them up. At the universe for taking your father away because of someone else's incompetence. She paused. But I'm also grateful, because even though he died because of Chen's mistakes, his final act was still heroic. He still chose to save someone else. That part of the story remains true. What should I do with this information? My mother thought carefully. I want the record corrected. I want the official documentation to reflect that your father died attempting to rescue a fellow soldier who'd frozen under fire. Not because I want to embarrass Chen or the army, but because your father deserves to have his sacrifice accurately recorded. He didn't just die in combat. He died trying to save someone who'd failed. That's actually more heroic than the sanitized version. That shows he was willing to risk everything for a brother who'd screwed up. That deserves to be acknowledged. So I contacted the Department of Defense, submitted Robert's confession, his journal, his documentation, requested that the official record be amended to reflect what had actually happened. The response was mixed. The Army acknowledged the new information but explained that amending historical records, especially those involving valor awards, was complicated. They agreed to add Robert's confession to the file but wouldn't revoke my father's Silver Star or change the official citation. Sergeant Porter's actions remain heroic regardless of the circumstances that necessitated them, an Army spokesman told me. His willingness to expose himself to enemy fire to attempt to rescue a fellow soldier is exactly the kind of valor the Silver Star recognizes. Robert died 4 months after our meeting. In his final weeks, he sent me several letters explaining that knowing I'd heard his confession had given him some measure of peace, not redemption. He was clear he didn't deserve that, but peace in finally acknowledging the truth. His funeral was small, a few relatives, some old veterans who'd known him. I attended, which surprised his family. "Why are you here?" his daughter asked. "Didn't he tell you? Didn't he confess what he did?" "He did, and he spent 53 years punishing himself for it. That's enough punishment. I'm here because he finally found the courage to tell the truth, and that counts for something." At the funeral, I spoke about my father, about how he died trying to save Robert, about how Robert had carried crushing guilt for half a century, about how both men were casualties of Vietnam in different ways, one who died quickly, one who died slowly, over 53 years of guilt. My mother and I established a memorial fund in my father's name. The citation includes the full truth that he died attempting to rescue a fellow soldier who'd frozen under fire during a mission that had been pursued against his better judgment. It's not as simple as the hero narrative I grew up with. It's messier, more complicated, more human, but it's the truth. My father was still a hero, but he was a hero who died because of someone else's mistakes. And acknowledging that doesn't diminish his sacrifice, it actually makes it more meaningful, because he didn't just die abstractly in combat. He died trying to save a specific person who'd failed, knowing that failure, accepting it, and choosing to help anyway. That's not just heroism, that's love. Robert Chen was a coward who made terrible decisions and then hid from them for 53 years. But at the end of his life, he found enough courage to confess, to tell the truth even though the truth destroyed any good opinion people might have of him. That's not redemption, but it's honest. And sometimes honest is the best we can offer the dead, truth instead of comfortable lies. I visit my father's grave now with a different understanding. I tell him I know what really happened. I tell him I understand why he made the choice he did. I tell him his sacrifice mattered, even though it shouldn't have been necessary. And I tell him that Robert Chen finally told the truth, that the secret he'd carried died with him, but not before being properly acknowledged. It's not justice. Justice would have been my father surviving, coming home, teaching me baseball like he'd planned. But it's truth, finally told, finally recorded, finally honored, and maybe 53 years late. That's enough.